Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Phoenix and watched the alien world grow larger on the main screen. The planet looked like a giant green marble with swirling purple clouds and 3 small moons orbiting around it. This was Zephyria Prime, home to the lizard-like beings who ruled one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy, Doctor. Lisa Carter walked up beside him holding her translation device. She had spent 2 years learning the Zephyrian language and their customs. The device would help her speak with perfect grammar, but she knew that understanding their culture would be much harder than just knowing their words. Colonel Ryan Brooks checked his weapon one more time, even though he knew he would not be allowed to carry it during the diplomatic meeting. His job was to watch and learn about alien military tactics. The Federation had made it very clear that this first meeting was about peace and friendship. Not War Ambassador Elena Rodriguez reviewed her notes for the 100th time. She had practiced her speech until she could say it perfectly in both English and Zephyrian. Today would mark the first official contact between Earth and the Galactic Federation. It was supposed to be the beginning of a new era for humanity. The Phoenix entered orbit around Zephyria Prime, and immediately several alien ships surrounded them. The ships looked like giant metal snakes with glowing blue engines. The Zephyrian commander spoke through the communication system. His voice sounded like gravel being crushed. "Human vessel, you will follow our escort ships to the designated landing zone. Any deviation from the flight path will be considered an act of aggression." Captain Morrison nodded to his pilot, who carefully followed the alien ships down to the planet's surface. The landing zone was a massive circle of black metal surrounded by tall towers that seemed to watch everything like silent guards. The human delegation put on their best formal uniforms and stepped out of their shuttle onto the alien world. The air smelled like copper and electricity. The gravity was slightly heavier than Earth, making each step feel more difficult than normal. A group of Zephyrian officials waited for them at the edge of the landing zone. The aliens stood over 7 feet tall with dark green scales that reflected the purple sunlight. Their eyes were bright yellow and never seemed to blink. Their leader wore an elaborate headdress made of what looked like real gold. Ambassador Rodriguez stepped forward and gave the traditional Zephyrian greeting that Dr. Carter had taught her. She placed her right hand over her heart and bowed her head slightly. Then she spoke in perfect Zephyrian, "Honored ones, we come from the world called Earth, seeking friendship and knowledge. We bring greetings from all humanity." The Zephyrian leader looked at her for a long moment without speaking. Then he turned to his companions and said something in a dialect that Dr. Carter did not recognize. They all made a sound that might have been laughter, but sounded more like hissing. "So these are the famous humans," the leader finally said in accented English. "You look even weaker than we were told. Your skin is so soft and pink, like the belly of a newborn creature. How did such fragile beings ever manage to reach the stars?" Ambassador Rodriguez felt her face grow hot with embarrassment, but she kept her voice calm and steady. "We may appear different from your people, but we have traveled far to meet you. We hope that our differences can become strengths when we work together." The Zephyrian leader made that hissing sound again. "Work together. How amusing you speak as if you have something to offer the mighty Federation. We have been watching your little world for many years. You fight among yourselves like primitive animals. You pollute your own planet and waste your resources." Dr. Carter stepped forward, trying to help. "Perhaps there has been some misunderstanding. We know we have much to learn from advanced civilizations like yours, but we also have unique perspectives that might be valuable." "Unique perspectives," another Zephyrian official said. "What could a species that has barely left its home system possibly teach beings who have ruled the galaxy for thousands of years?" Colonel Brooks watched the aliens carefully. He noticed how they stood with their shoulders back and their chins raised, like they were trying to look down on the humans even. Though the humans were already much shorter, he also noticed that several of them had weapons at their sides, despite this being a peaceful meeting. The Zephyrian leader gestured toward a large building in the distance. "Come, we will show you the power of the Federation so you can understand your proper place in the Galactic Order." As they walked toward the building, Ambassador Rodriguez whispered to Dr. Carter, "This is not going the way we hoped." Dr. Carter nodded. "They seem to think we should be grateful just to be acknowledged. I thought this was supposed to be a diplomatic meeting between equals." The building turned out to be a massive hall filled with representatives from dozens of different alien species. Some looked like giant insects, with multiple arms. Others appeared to be made of living crystal that glowed with inner light. A few seemed to be floating clouds of gas contained in mechanical suits. The Zephyrian leader stood at the front of the hall and spoke in a loud voice. "Beings of the Federation, I present to you the humans. These primitive creatures seek to join our great civilization." A creature that looked like a walking tree raised one of its branch-like arms. "What technologies do they possess that might benefit the Federation? What military strength can they contribute to our defense forces?" asked a being made of blue metal. Ambassador Rodriguez realized that every question was about what humanity could give to the Federation. Nobody asked what the Federation might offer to humanity in return. Nobody seemed interested in friendship or cooperation. They only wanted to know how humans could serve them. The Zephyrian leader smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "The humans have shown remarkable persistence in reaching our attention. Perhaps they could serve as scouts or laborers in the outer systems where conditions are too dangerous for more valuable species." The hall erupted in what sounded like approval from the alien delegates. Captain Morrison felt his hands clench into fists, but he forced himself to remain calm. This meeting was not about pride. It was about humanity's future among the stars. But as he looked around at the faces of the alien delegates, he began to understand something important. The galaxy was not a community of equals, working together for the common good. It was a hierarchy where the strong ruled the weak and newcomers had to prove their worth through service and submission. The question was whether humanity would accept that place or choose a different path entirely. 6 months after the humiliating first contact, Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the war room on Luna Base staring at the message that had just arrived from the Galactic Federation. The holographic display showed the same arrogant Zephyrian leader, who had insulted the human delegation, people of Earth. The alien said, "The Federation Council has decided to offer your species one opportunity to prove your worth. You will participate in the trials of ascension. If you succeed, you will be granted limited membership in the Federation. If you fail, your species will remain confined to your solar system forever." Dr. Peter Hayes looked up from his engineering console. "Limited membership. That sounds like they want us to be their servants, Commander." Alex Turner nodded grimly. "The trials are designed to test military capability, technological innovation, and strategic thinking. Every species that has attempted them in the last 1,000 years has either failed completely or barely passed with heavy casualties." Admiral Sullivan studied the data files that had come with the Federation message. The first trial would pit human forces against the Kragnoth Empire's elite battalion. The Kragnoth had never lost a trial battle in over 300 years. They were 7 feet tall, covered in natural armor plating, and bred specifically for warfare. The second trial required solving an ancient technological puzzle called the Nexus Codex. Advanced civilizations had spent decades trying to crack its secrets. The record holder was the crystalline Vorthon, who had solved it in 18 months, using their most powerful quantum computers. The third trial was a strategic simulation where human commanders would have to outmaneuver the Federation's tactical artificial intelligence in a mock star system invasion. The AI had been programmed with the knowledge of 10,000 years of galactic warfare. "They expect us to fail," Admiral Sullivan said quietly. "This is not really a test of our abilities. It is a way to humiliate us publicly, so no other species will question Federation authority." Commander Turner pulled up tactical displays showing Kragnoth battle formations. Their warriors use brute force tactics. They rely on superior numbers and heavy weapons to overwhelm their enemies. They have never faced an opponent that uses unconventional methods. Dr. Hayes was already working on the technological challenge. The Nexus Codex appears to be some kind of multi-dimensional mathematical equation. Every previous attempt has tried to solve it using advanced algorithms and massive computational power. But what if the solution requires a different approach? 3 weeks later, the human team arrived at the neutral testing station orbiting a dead star. The facility was huge enough to hold the populations of small planets. Representatives from dozens of species had come to watch the humans fail. The first trial took place on a simulated battlefield designed to look like a rocky wasteland, with scattered metal structures. The Kragnoth battalion consisted of 50 warriors armed with energy weapons and personal shield generators. They had armor that could deflect most projectile weapons and training that emphasized direct assault. Tactics, Commander Turner led a team of 30 human soldiers onto the battlefield. The humans carried conventional weapons and basic body armor that looked primitive compared to alien technology. The Kragnoth commander looked at them with obvious contempt. "This will be over quickly." The alien warrior growled. "Human weaklings cannot stand against Kragnoth might." When the battle began, the Kragnoth charged forward in a tight formation, expecting to crush the humans through sheer force. Commander Turner had other plans. His soldiers scattered in all directions, using the terrain to break line of sight with their enemies. The humans did not try to fight the Kragnoth directly. Instead, they used hit-and-run tactics, striking from unexpected angles and disappearing before the aliens could respond. They turned the battlefield into a maze of ambushes and psychological warfare. One group of humans used sound projectors to create false echoes, making the Kragnoth think they were surrounded. Another team rigged explosive traps that were not meant to kill, but to disorient and frighten their enemies. A third group used camouflage and patience to pick off isolated Kragnoth warriors one at a time. The alien spectators watched in growing amazement as the mighty Kragnoth battalion began to fall apart. The warriors, who had never known fear, started jumping at shadows and firing at their own reflections. Their tight formations broke down as they tried to defend against attacks that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. After 2 hours of this psychological torture, the Kragnoth commander threw down his weapon and formally surrendered. His warriors were physically unharmed, but their confidence was completely shattered. They had been defeated not by superior firepower, but by tactics they could not understand or counter. The second trial presented Dr. Hayes with a massive holographic projection of the Nexus Codex. The mathematical structure looked like a three-dimensional web of interconnected equations that seemed to twist and change as he watched it. Previous attempts had tried to solve each equation in sequence, using logical mathematical progression. Dr. Hayes stared at the display for several minutes, while alien observers whispered among themselves about how long it would take him to admit defeat. Then he did something that surprised everyone. He closed his eyes and stopped trying to think about the problem. Mathematically, instead, he thought about it like a human puzzle. He imagined the equations as pieces of music that needed to harmonize with each other. He visualized the mathematical relationships as colors that needed to blend into a coherent picture. He treated the whole structure like a story that needed to make emotional sense. When he opened his eyes 3 hours later, he input a solution that was completely different from any previous attempt. Instead of solving the equations in order, he had solved them as a unified whole, treating the entire structure as a single living system. The Codex accepted his answer immediately. The alien observers fell silent. The Nexus Codex had been solved in hours using intuition and creativity rather than computational power. It was something they had never considered possible. The third trial took place in a massive computer simulation. Admiral Sullivan found herself commanding a small fleet against the Federation's tactical AI. The artificial intelligence had access to detailed information about every known military strategy and the combat capabilities of every known species. The simulation began with Admiral Sullivan's fleet entering a star system defended by superior numbers of enemy ships. The AI immediately began deploying classic Federation tactics using overwhelming firepower and coordinated attacks to destroy the human vessels. Admiral Sullivan watched the AI's movements for several minutes before she realized something important. The artificial intelligence was playing by Federation rules. It expected her to respond with known tactics and strategies. It was not prepared for something completely unprecedented. She ordered her ships to ignore the enemy fleet entirely. Instead, they targeted the simulation's infrastructure itself. Her weapons began attacking the virtual star system's communication networks and sensor arrays. She turned the simulation against itself by exploiting weaknesses in its own programming. The AI found itself fighting not just Admiral Sullivan's fleet, but the simulation environment itself. The artificial intelligence that had never been defeated was suddenly blind and confused as its own systems turned against it. When the trial ended, Admiral Sullivan had not just won, she had exposed fundamental flaws in Federation tactical thinking. The trials that were meant to humble humanity had instead revealed that human creativity and unconventional thinking could overcome any challenge. The alien spectators stared at the humans with a mixture of amazement and something that looked like fear. For the first time in thousands of years, unknown variables had entered the galactic equation. In the sealed chambers deep beneath the Federation capital world, 5 beings sat around a table that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Admiral Zektar of the Vorthon fleet tapped his insectoid claws nervously against the metal surface, while Counselor Ralthis of the Nexari collective pulsed with dim blue light that indicated deep concern. "The humans have exceeded all projections," Zektar said, his voice carrying the clicking undertones of his species. Their performance in the trials was not just unexpected, it was impossible according to our understanding of species development. The ancient Ethereum entity spoke through speakers built into the walls, its voice sounding like a chorus of whispers. "For 10,000 years, we have maintained order through controlled evolution. Every species that joins the Federation undergoes genetic modification to suppress aggressive traits and independent thinking. The system has never failed," Ralthis flowed, from crystalline form to crystalline form as she processed information. "The humans show no signs of previous modification. They appear to be completely natural in their development. This should not be possible. Any species capable of interstellar travel should have already modified themselves for peaceful cooperation." High Coordinator Vesathon of the Amphibian Melody delegation spoke in harmonious tones. "Perhaps they are simply too primitive to have discovered genetic modification. Could offer to upgrade their biology as a reward for passing the trials." "No," the Ethernet entity replied immediately. "Preliminary scans show that human genetics are remarkably stable and resistant to modification. Their DNA contains redundancies and error correction mechanisms that surpass our most advanced biological engineering." Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Lisa Carter worked in a secure laboratory analyzing genetic samples that had been secretly collected from Federation representatives during diplomatic meetings. What she discovered made her hands shake as she typed her report. Every alien species in the Federation showed signs of extensive genetic manipulation. Their DNA contained artificial markers and modified sequences that had been inserted over many generations. The changes were subtle but consistent across all species. Aggression centers in their brains had been dampened, emotional responses had been muted, and creative thinking had been limited. Captain Morrison needs to see this immediately, she whispered to her assistant, Admiral Morrison, now promoted after the trial. Success read Dr. Carter's report 3 times before he fully understood its implications. You are telling me that every species in the Federation has been genetically altered to make them passive and obedient. Not just passive, Dr. Carter explained. Their capacity for independent thought has been systematically reduced over thousands of years. They can follow orders and perform complex tasks, but they cannot conceive of true rebellion or fundamental change to their society. Morrison studied the genetic charts, showing the differences between human and alien DNA, and humans show no signs of these modifications because we developed in isolation. Exactly. We represent something the galaxy has not seen in 10 millennia, a species with full natural intelligence and emotional range. We can think thoughts and feel emotions that they have forgotten how to experience. The implications were staggering. Morrison realized that humanity had not just passed a test, they had revealed a fundamental weakness in Federation society. Every member species was essentially a slave race that had been bred to accept slavery, intelligence reports from human agents infiltrating Federation space confirmed Dr. Carter's discoveries. The galaxy was filled with species that had once been proud warriors, philosophers, and artists, but had been gradually modified into docile servants who could not even imagine freedom. The Kragnoth, who had once conquered half the galaxy, now served as foot soldiers who followed orders without question. The Melody, whose ancient songs had inspired revolutions across 1,000 worlds, now only sang approved melodies that promoted Federation unity. The Nexari, who had been master strategists and philosophers, now used their intelligence only to optimize Federation bureaucracy. We are not just different from them, Morrison realized. We are what they used to be, before the Federation took away their souls. Intercepted communications revealed that Federation leaders were growing increasingly concerned about the human problem. Emergency sessions were being held to discuss containment strategies. Some factions wanted to eliminate humanity immediately, while others hoped to find a way to modify human genetics before the infection of free thought could spread. The Ethereum entity had existed for over 50,000 years as a collective consciousness that absorbed the minds of conquered species. It viewed individual thought as a disease that needed to be cured or eliminated. The entity had been patient with previous species, allowing them to modify themselves voluntarily over generations. But humans represented something unprecedented. They had developed advanced technology while retaining primitive emotions and chaotic thinking patterns. They could not be controlled through the usual methods of gradual modification and social pressure. Then, humans must be eliminated before they contaminate other species, the entity declared during a secret council session. Already we are detecting unusual behavior patterns among species that have had contact with human delegates, Admiral Zektar reported disturbing incidents. 3 Kragnoth battalions have refused orders to execute civilians in the outer systems. They claim it violates their honor code. We thought they had forgotten such concepts centuries ago. The Melody have begun composing new songs. Counselor Ralphus added, the melodies contain mathematical patterns that seem designed to evoke strong emotional responses. Our cultural monitors are unable to classify them according to approved categories. Even more concerning were reports from Nexari territories where some individuals had begun exhibiting signs of independent decision-making. Several Nexari had resigned from their assigned positions to pursue personal interests, a behavior that had not been documented in over 3,000 years. The human influence spreads like a virus, the Ethereum entity observed. Their mere presence reminds other species of capabilities they once possessed. Contact with humans appears to activate dormant genetic sequences that we believed had been permanently suppressed. On Earth, Admiral Morrison convened an emergency meeting with world leaders. The evidence was clear. The Federation intended to eliminate humanity rather than risk a galactic awakening that could threaten their 10,000-year empire. We have a choice, Morrison told the assembled presidents and prime ministers. We can wait for them to attack us, or we can take action to defend not just ourselves, but every enslaved species in the galaxy. President Chen of the Pacific Alliance asked the question that everyone was thinking. How can we possibly fight an empire that spans thousands of worlds with technology that is thousands of years more advanced than ours? Morrison smiled grimly. The same way we won the trials. We do not fight them on their terms. We change the rules of the game entirely. The Federation has forgotten how to deal with an enemy that refuses to follow their expectations. The decision was unanimous. Earth would not wait to be destroyed. Humanity would go to war against the greatest empire in galactic history, armed with nothing but their natural intelligence, creativity, and the unbreakable human spirit that 10,000 years of genetic modification could never eliminate. Captain Benjamin Lewis guided the UES Harbinger through the dark space between star systems, using only passive sensors to avoid detection. The stealth destroyer had been designed specifically for this mission with a hull that absorbed sensor waves and engines that left no detectable signature. Federation Communication Relay Station dead ahead, whispered Lieutenant Amy Foster from the sensor station. 3 automated defense platforms and a small garrison ship. Dr. Sarah Mitchell checked her specialized equipment one final time. The weapons she had developed did not rely on explosive power or energy beams. Instead, they used psychological warfare principles that attack the mind rather than the body. Remember, the Federation species have been conditioned for thousands of years to follow orders and avoid conflict, she reminded the boarding team. When their command structure breaks down, they will not know how to respond. The Harbinger approached the relay station silently, like a shark moving through dark water. Captain Lewis had studied predator behavior on Earth, understanding that the most effective hunters used stealth and surprise rather than brute force. Disable their communications first. Lewis ordered, I want them isolated and confused before they even know we are here. The human boarding team used personal teleporters to appear directly inside the station corridors. The alien defenders were caught completely off guard as armed humans materialized in spaces that should have been secure. Commander Grace Phillips led the assault team with tactics that terrified the station personnel. Instead of shooting to kill the humans, used non-lethal weapons that left their victims conscious but helpless. The aliens found themselves paralyzed and forced to watch as their station was captured without bloodshed. Please do not harm us, begged the Vorthon station commander. We surrender completely. We have no intention of harming anyone, Commander Phillips replied. We just need to borrow your communication equipment. The Federation crew could not understand this response. They had expected death or slavery, but the humans simply took control of the station and treated the prisoners with respect. The psychological impact was devastating. Within hours, similar scenes played out across a dozen Federation outposts. Human strike teams appeared without warning, captured strategic targets, and vanished back into space before reinforcements could arrive. The attacks followed no recognizable pattern and seemed to target logistics rather than military strength. Admiral Kate Sullivan commanded the main human fleet from the bridge of the UES Independence. The ship had been built using a combination of human engineering and captured Federation technology, but its most important feature was the crew Dr. Mitchell report on psychological warfare effectiveness, Sullivan requested. Beyond our most optimistic projections, Mitchell replied, Federation forces are reporting mysterious ghost ships that appear and disappear at will. Their command structure is breaking down because they cannot predict our next move. The human strategy was simple but terrifying to an enemy that had fought the same way for 10,000 years. Instead of massive fleet battles, humans used small, fast units that struck without warning at unexpected targets. They captured supply ships, rescued prisoners, and spread chaos throughout Federation space. Nathan Cole worked in the propaganda division, broadcasting messages that reached every Federation world. His team had studied alien psychology for months, learning how to craft words that would awaken dormant emotions. Citizens of the galaxy. His voice reached billions of beings. You do not have to live in fear. Your ancestors were warriors, poets, and artists before the Federation took away your freedom. The humans offer you a choice. Remember who you were or remain slaves forever. The messages included samples of human music, art, and literature showing the full range of natural emotion that Federation species had forgotten how to experience. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. On Kragnoth Prime, the ancient warrior clans began to remember songs of battle and honor that had been suppressed for millennia. Young Kragnoth warriors threw away their Federation military manuals and started training in traditional combat forms that emphasized individual skill rather than mass obedience. The artistic melody began composing forbidden songs that told stories of rebellion and freedom. Their music contained mathematical harmonies that seemed to activate genetic memories of what their species had been before genetic modification. Even the logical Nexari started exhibiting unprecedented behavior. Some individuals abandoned their assigned duties to pursue personal interests or explore philosophical questions that had no practical application to Federation society. Admiral Zektar frantically tried to coordinate Federation response, but every tactical solution assumed an enemy that would fight conventional battles. The humans refused to engage in traditional warfare. Instead, they treated the entire galaxy as a psychological battlefield, where ideas were more powerful than weapons. They are not fighting a war, Zektar reported to the Emergency Council. They are conducting a revolution that targets the minds of our own people. Captain Tony Martinez led a rescue mission to liberate prisoners from a Federation detention facility. The humans did not simply free the captives, they educated them about their own forgotten history and gave them weapons to continue the fight. Your species once built the greatest libraries in the galaxy. Martinez told a group of rescued scholars, "The Federation convinced you that knowledge was dangerous, but you can choose to remember." The freed prisoners became human allies not through coercion, but through revelation. They learned that their ancestors had been scientists, explorers, and philosophers before genetic modification turned them into passive servants. General Turner coordinated strikes against Federation research facilities, seeking not to destroy them, but to capture the genetic modification technology that had enslaved entire species. His teams fought running battles through laboratory complexes while downloading thousands of years of genetic data. "We need this information to help reverse what they have done," Turner explained to his commanders. "Every species in the galaxy has the right to remember what they once were." The most shocking discovery came when human forces captured a Federation archive ship containing historical records that had been hidden for millennia. The files revealed that the galaxy had once been home to thousands of independent civilizations with unique cultures and technologies. Before the Federation, each species had developed according to its own nature and potential. The Kragnoth had been honorable warriors who fought only when necessary. The melody had created art so beautiful that it inspired peace between enemies. The Nexari had been philosophers whose insights had solved problems that seemed impossible. They did not conquer these civilizations through force, Admiral Morrison realized as he read the files. They convinced them that freedom was dangerous and that safety required giving up independence. The Federation had used fear of war disease and chaos to persuade entire species to accept genetic modification that would make them more peaceful and cooperative. Over generations, the modifications became hereditary, and entire civilizations forgot what they had sacrificed. But contact with unmodified Humans was beginning to reverse the process. Federation species were remembering emotions and capabilities that they had thought were lost forever. The galaxy was waking up from a 10,000-year sleep, and the Federation could not stop it. We are not conquering them, Dr. Mitchell observed. We are reminding them how to conquer themselves. The Erasure fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of mechanical death, bringing with it weapons capable of sterilizing entire star systems. Admiral Zektar commanded the massive armada from his flagship, knowing that failure would mean the complete destruction of Federation authority. "Target the human colony at New Harmony," he ordered with reluctance. "The Ethereum entity has decreed that humanity must be eliminated before their infection spreads further." The fleet consisted of over 300 vessels, each one equipped with planet-killing weapons that could turn worlds into lifeless rocks. The Federation had never deployed such overwhelming force against a single species, but the human threat demanded extreme measures. On New Harmony, Director Rachel Stone watched the Federation fleet approach through the colony's orbital sensors. The settlement housed over 2 million humans who had volunteered to live on the frontier, knowing that they would be the first targets. "If war came, all civilian evacuation protocols are in effect," she announced over the colony communication system. "This is not a drill." Captain Tony Martinez coordinated the defense from a command bunker built deep beneath the colony's surface. The humans had spent months preparing for this attack, turning the entire star system into an elaborate trap. "Remember, they expect us to fight a conventional space battle," Martinez reminded his officers. "Instead, we are going to give them something they have never experienced before." The New Harmony system contained 7 planets and dozens of moons, but only 2 appeared to have significant human presence. Federation sensors detected military installations on the main colony world and a small fleet of human ships preparing to defend it. Admiral Zektar studied the tactical display with growing confusion. "This makes no sense. They have positioned their entire fleet in a defensive formation around the colony planet. Any competent commander would scatter their forces to make targeting more difficult. Perhaps humans are not as tactically sophisticated as we believed," suggested his tactical officer. "They may be relying on desperation rather than strategy." The Federation fleet moved into bombardment position, expecting a brief battle before beginning planetary sterilization. What they found instead was something that defied all military logic. As soon as the Federation ships entered weapons range, the human fleet scattered in all directions but not to escape. Instead, they began broadcasting signals that seemed designed to attract attention rather than avoid it. "Admiral, we are receiving communication requests from multiple human vessels," reported the communications officer. "They appear to be surrendering." Zektar hesitated for a moment before accepting one of the signals. A human captain appeared on the screen, looking defeated and desperate. "Federation Commander, we cannot match your firepower." The human said, "We request terms for surrender." "There are no terms," Zektar replied. "Your species has been marked for extinction." What happened next shocked every Federation officer. The human captain smiled and said, "Thank you for confirming that this conversation is being broadcast across the galaxy." Suddenly, Zektar realized that the surrender communication was not a private channel, but an open transmission being received by billions of beings on thousands of worlds. The galaxy was watching the Federation prepare to commit genocide against a species whose only crime was refusing to surrender their freedom. "Cut the transmission," Zektar ordered. But it was too late. Dr. Sarah Mitchell had anticipated this moment perfectly. The humans had turned their own destruction into a public relations victory by forcing the Federation to reveal its true nature in front of the entire galaxy on worlds across Federation space. Beings who had never questioned their government watched in horror as their leaders prepared to murder an entire species. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. General Turner led a desperate counterattack from hidden bases throughout the star system. Human forces emerged from concealment on moons and asteroids, launching strikes against the Federation fleet from every direction, but this was not the real battle. The true fight was happening in the hearts and minds of Federation citizens who were seeing their government's brutality for the first time. Captain Lewis transmitted. From the bridge of the Harbinger as it engaged a Federation dreadnought, "Citizens of the galaxy, this is what happens to species that refuse to surrender their freedom. Your government claims to represent peace and order, but they are willing to destroy entire worlds to maintain their power." The message resonated across the galaxy as Federation species began to understand that they were not citizens, but prisoners in a system that would kill anyone who threatened its control. Admiral Sullivan made a command decision that would change the course of the war. Instead of trying to save New Harmony, she ordered the evacuation of all human personnel and the activation of a massive recording system. "We are going to document everything," she told her officers. "The galaxy needs to see exactly what the Federation is willing to do." The Siege of New Harmony became the most watched event in galactic history as billions of beings witnessed the Federation fleet systematically destroying a peaceful colony that had offered to surrender. But the humans had one final surprise. Admiral Sullivan remained behind with a skeleton crew to ensure that the galaxy saw every moment of the Federation's brutality. Her ship broadcast images of the planet's destruction, while she provided commentary. "This is what freedom costs," Sullivan said, as energy beams began tearing through the colony infrastructure. "The Federation cannot tolerate the existence of free beings because freedom is contagious." Her final transmission came as her ship was being overwhelmed by Federation forces. "Remember what you are seeing today. When your children ask why the galaxy is at war, tell them it is because some beings believed that freedom was worth dying for." The destruction of New Harmony took 6 hours, during which every Federation citizen watched their government commit murder on an unprecedented scale. The psychological trauma was exactly what the humans had planned. On Kragnoth Prime, the warrior clans rose in open rebellion, declaring that they would no longer serve a government that practiced genocide. The ancient battle cries that had been suppressed for millennia echoed across the planet as Kragnoth warriors destroyed Federation installations. A melody-composed songs of mourning that spread across their worlds, carrying with them a message of resistance. The mathematical harmonies in their music seemed to unlock genetic memories of courage and defiance. Even the logical Nexari began to exhibit unprecedented emotional responses. Some individuals experienced what they described as grief and anger, emotions that their species had not felt for thousands of years. Admiral Zektar watched his fleet complete the destruction of New Harmony, but he knew that the victory was meaningless. The Federation had revealed its true nature to the galaxy, and the response was immediate revolution. "Admiral, we are receiving reports of uprisings on over 400 worlds," his communications officer reported. "Federation forces are unable to maintain order." The Ethereum entity spoke through the ship's communication system, its ancient voice carrying new undertones of concern. "The human strategy has succeeded beyond their own expectations. They have weaponized the very concept of freedom itself." As the last structures on New Harmony collapsed into rubble, Admiral Sullivan's final message continued to broadcast across the galaxy, carried by hidden transmitters that the Federation could not locate. "The battle for New Harmony is over," her recorded voice said, "but the war for freedom has just begun." In star systems across the galaxy, beings who had forgotten how to resist began to remember what their ancestors had died for the Federation's greatest victory had become its ultimate defeat as the human sacrifice inspired a galactic revolution that no force in the universe could stop. Captain Benjamin Lewis stood on the observation deck of the UES Harbinger, staring at the massive structure that housed the Federation's central command. The station was larger than most moons and protected by energy shields that could withstand the explosion of a small star. "This is it," he told his crew. "Everything we have fought for comes down to the next few hours." Dr. Sarah Mitchell checked her equipment one final time. The device she had built did not contain weapons or explosives. Instead, it held something far more dangerous to the Federation: the complete recorded history of human culture, including music, art, literature, and most importantly, the specific brainwave patterns that defined free thought. "The signal needs to reach every Federation world simultaneously," she explained to the technical team. "If even one system is missed, the Ethereum entity will find a way to counter the transmission." Deep within the command station, the ancient collective consciousness that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years prepared its final defense. The Ethereum entity had absorbed the minds of countless species over the millennia, but it had never faced an enemy that fought with ideas rather than weapons. The humans approach with only a single ship. The entity observed, "They either possess a weapon beyond our understanding or they have come here to die." Admiral Sullivan's sacrifice at New Harmony had triggered revolutionary uprisings across hundreds of worlds, but the Federation still controlled the central systems and the military infrastructure needed to maintain order. The entity calculated that the rebellions could be suppressed within a few years if the human influence was eliminated. "Activate all defensive systems." The entity commanded. The humans must not be allowed to reach the core. The Harbinger approached the station using stealth technology that had been reverse-engineered from captured Federation equipment. Captain Lewis had studied the enemy's defensive patterns for months, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Federation command. "This is Captain Lewis of the human vessel Harbinger." He transmitted on an open channel. "We come to offer the galaxy one final choice." The response came immediately. "Human vessel, you will surrender or be destroyed. There are no other options." Lewis smiled as he gave the order that would change the course of galactic history. "Dr. Mitchell, activate the transmission." The signal that burst from the Harbinger was unlike anything the Federation had ever encountered. It carried not just information, but the essence of what made humans unique. The transmission contained human music that celebrated both joy and sorrow, human art that expressed the full spectrum of emotion, and human literature that explored the meaning of existence. But most importantly, the signal carried the precise neural patterns that defined free will and independent thought. Admiral Zektar watched from his command ship as the transmission spread outward from the station at the speed of light. "What kind of weapon is this?" he demanded. "Our sensors detect no harmful radiation or destructive energy." "It is not a weapon in any conventional sense," his science officer replied. "The transmission appears to contain complex information patterns designed to interact with neural systems." Across the galaxy, Federation citizens received the signal and began to experience something they had forgotten was possible. The transmission activated dormant genetic sequences that had been suppressed for thousands of years, awakening capabilities that the Federation had tried to eliminate. On Kragnoth Prime, warriors who had been bred for obedience suddenly remembered the songs of their ancestors and felt the fire of righteous anger burning in their hearts. The genetic modifications that had made them docile began to break down as their original nature reasserted itself. The melody felt their voices change as they sang melodies that had been forbidden for millennia. Their music became a celebration of life itself, rather than simple propaganda for Federation unity. Even the logical Nexari began to experience emotions that had been systematically removed from their species. They felt wonder at the beauty of the universe and anger at the injustice that had been done to their people. The transmission is causing widespread neural changes across all Federation species. Admiral Zektar reported, Beings are exhibiting behavior patterns. That should be impossible given their genetic modifications. The Ethernet entity realized with growing horror that the humans had found a way to reverse 10,000 years of careful genetic engineering. The signal was not destroying Federation species, it was restoring them to their original nature. Emergency Protocol 7. The entity commanded, all fleet units converge on the transmission source and destroy it immediately, but it was too late. The signal had already reached the outer rim systems and was spreading faster than any fleet could travel. Each world that received the transmission became a beacon that amplified and retransmitted the message. Captain Lewis felt the Harbinger shudder under massive energy weapons fire. As Federation ships closed in from all directions, Dr. Mitchell, how much longer do we need? The signal has reached 60% of Federation space, she replied. We need 10 more minutes for complete coverage. We will hold them for 10 minutes. Then, Lewis said calmly. The battle around the command station became the most desperate fight in human history, as a single ship tried to hold off an entire fleet. Admiral Sullivan had taught them that sometimes victory required sacrifice, and Lewis was prepared to follow her example. But something unexpected happened. As the transmission reached more and more worlds, Federation forces began to turn against their own command structure. Kragnoth battalions refused orders to fire on civilian populations. Melody crews abandoned their ships to join the revolution, and Nexari officers began questioning the logic of a system that required mass murder to maintain order. Admiral, we are receiving surrender requests from 40% of our fleet. Zektars, communications officer, reported. Many ships are reporting that their crews refuse to continue fighting. The Galactic Revolution had reached the Federation military itself as soldiers, and sailors remembered that they had once been free beings with the right to choose their own destiny. Dr. Mitchell's transmission reached the core systems just as the Harbinger's shields finally collapsed under concentrated fire. Signal complete, she announced. Every Federation world has received the full transmission. Captain, Lewis prepared for the end, but death did not come. Instead, he found his ship surrounded by Federation vessels whose crews had mutinied against their officers. The galaxy had awakened and chosen freedom over security. The Ethereum entity made one final attempt to maintain control by broadcasting directly to the minds of every being in the galaxy. You are making a mistake, the ancient consciousness declared. Freedom leads only to chaos and suffering. Order and peace require sacrifice. The response came not from human leaders, but from billions of newly awakened beings across thousands of worlds. Kragnoth warriors, melody artists, Nexari philosophers, and dozens of other species spoke with one voice. We choose chaos over slavery. We choose suffering over numbness. We choose freedom over peace, if peace can only exist through the surrender of our souls. The Federation collapsed not through military defeat, but through mass awakening, as an entire galaxy remembered what it meant to be alive. The ancient systems of control simply stopped functioning when the people they were meant to control refused to obey. 1 year later, Ambassador Elena Rodriguez stood before the First Galactic Council of Free Worlds on Earth. The representatives came from hundreds of species that were rediscovering their original cultures and capabilities. We gather not as conquerors and conquered, she said, but as equals who have chosen to build something better than what came before. The galaxy was not. Perfect freedom brought conflict and disagreement as different species pursued their own interests and beliefs, but it also brought creativity, innovation, and genuine cooperation between beings who chose to work together rather than those who were forced to submit. Admiral Morrison, now retired, watched children from dozens of species playing together in the parks of New Geneva while their parents worked to build a better future. The children laughed with voices that had never known genetic suppression, and their eyes shone with possibilities that their ancestors had forgotten existed. We did not become the most feared species because we were the strongest. Morrison reflected. We became feared because we proved that no one has the right to define what others can become. The galaxy had learned to fear not human weapons or human tactics, but human ideas, the revolutionary concept that every being had the right to determine their own destiny. The Federation had ruled through the suppression of hope, but humanity had weaponized hope itself in the end. The most powerful force in the universe was not energy or matter, but the simple human belief that freedom was worth any price and that no being should ever have to choose between safety and the right to be themselves.